God's response to Israel's apostasy at Shittim was swift. We also know that it was fatal, for the guilty were judged, a plague released with devastating results, and 24,000 unfaithful men died until it was halted. But the big question I ask myself concerning Israel's apostasy is this: where was Moses, the leader, the pastor, the shepherd? Surely he couldn't have just stood by and watched his congregation slip off into the night and join itself to Baal Peor and do nothing about it. He wouldn't have stood at the head of the camp the next morning with his arms open wide, welcoming his men back in after having their fill of perversion and letting on that everything was fine. After all that had happened with Israel in the incident with the golden calf, you would think that Moses would be a bit sharper, a bit more zealous to confine Israel's worship solely to God. But sadly it seems that God had to instruct Moses again into action over this incident. There probably were zealous men of God watching in the background, waiting to be released, wanting to take action for God. For God always has a faithful remnant, but as usual, church protocol gets in the way. Don't overstep your mark. The pastor calls all the shots here. You know, the garbage that church comes out with when the Holy Spirit gets hold of a man on fire for God. So when Phineas witnessed what Zimri and Cosby got up to, he was incensed, for he fully understood how serious God was against this sin, and that impacted him. He wasn't going to hang around and watch the sin escalate in the camp. Phineas probably wasn't the only one thinking of doing something, but he was the only one willing to stand up and do something about it. Now, I'm not asking you or telling you to be unfaithful to your leadership or to rebel, but if pornography is in your fellowship and being ignored, then you do something about it. You don't have to run around thrusting a spear at everyone, but you can take a stand in your fellowship and be counted. If your leader can't see the sin, or doesn't want to see the sin, or is too busy doing other things, then God is looking for you to execute his judgment upon sin. He has already given the command: no sin in the fellowship. Hang everyone who has joined themselves to Baal Peor. Your church is screaming out for action. The women were weeping at the door of the tabernacle, and where was Moses? Moses was sweeping among them instead of fighting on the front line, combating the sin before it got in among the congregation. Sir, the Lord is waiting on you to get your act together, for you have no idea how important you are, for you just may be God's rescue plan in among your church. You have been called for a time like this. If the Lord had have wanted you fighting in the trenches of the First World War or attacking the beaches of Germany, you would have been there fighting. But you are here now for this battle and have been called for the role that Christ has for you to step into. Next time you're in church, just take a look around you, for he doesn't have anybody else. He isn't interested in a Superman or a Wonderwoman to fight his battles. He is looking for you to rise up to the challenge. So don't pass the buck or make the excuse of relying on the other guy, because he's slightly hiding behind a well-dressed appearance, but living through a nightmare of an existence. Israel's recklessness with Baal Peor was a disaster of biblical proportions. It was far worse than what happened at Sodom and Gomorrah, and we know how the church likes to preach in that one. If you continue to worship Baal Peor, sex worship through watching pornography, then you, sir, are on a collision course with God and will face a judgment and wrath far more devastating than what happened at Shittim. Deuteronomy verse 4 in chapter 3. Your eyes have seen what the Lord did because of Baal Peor. For the men that followed Baal Peor, the Lord thy God hath destroyed them from among you. But you did not cleave unto the Lord your God, and are alive, every one of you to this day. My name is Gervin, and this is Gen 3X.